before we begin this video, let me ask you a question. Who do you think will do more damage? A woman using her yacht to attack enemies, or a supernatural entity using wind for evil conquering? Now, this question cannot be answered without knowing what Varesa even does. And I'll be honest, her kit is quite complex, with the description being all over the place. However, once you go through this insanely detailed guide for her, you'll have no doubts whatsoever regarding her kit, weapons, team comps, artifacts, constellations, and whatever else you could think of, along with her downsides. But before we begin, let me quickly mention two things about her. First is that she is an electro-based plunge unit who enters Night Soul state or the Fiery Passion state at 40 Night Soul points. Another thing to keep in mind is her general rotation, which starts off with her elemental skill, followed by a normal attack, plunge attack, repeat the entire thing again, followed by her burst, and then you do this entire rotation once more. Now, I know there might be people here who have seen other content creators and think that the 5E rotation is her best one. But well, that has some issues, and I'll talk more about it after explaining her kit. So as usual, I'll have this rotation on screen while explaining her kit, because that will make it easier to understand. And I implore you to watch this video fully so that you will have a perfect understanding of her kit. With that being said, let's get right into it. Starting off with her charge attack, Varesa jumps forward a bit, attacking the enemy and jumping into the air, which allows her to plunge. Now, this is very important, as this is literally her primary method of plunging, and if you are worried about the stamina consumption, then this is where her elemental skill comes into play. You see, her elemental skill is of two types, with the first one being what you normally have, and the other one is her enhanced skill, which is activated when she is in the Fiery Passion state. Now, her default skill has two charges, and when you press the skill button, she dashes through the enemy, dealing damage and using one of the charges. Now, immediately after using the skill, she gains a follow-up effect which changes her normal attack to a charge attack. But this charge attack won't consume any stamina, allowing her to leap into the air and plunge onto the enemy. Now, this is where shit gets real. You see, when she does a normal skill dash, she gains 20 Night Soul points. And when you follow it up with a plunge, she gains an additional 25 points. Now, since she has 45 points, which is above the required 40, she enters the Fiery Passion state. And while she is in this state, her skill is changed to the enhanced skill, and if the enhanced skill is in cooldown, then its timer is reset. So now you do the enhanced skill, follow it up with a normal or charge attack to leap into the air and finally plunge onto the enemy, ending the Fiery Passion state. Now, if you are thinking that since she requires 40 Night Soul points to enter the Fiery Passion state, you could just enter it by doing the skill twice, then I hate to break it to you, but she can only enter it when she does a plunge attack. So doing the skill twice won't activate it. Moving on to her burst, which is of three types. First is the normal burst, where she consumes all of her energy and deals a big electro attack. Second is her enhanced burst in the Fiery Passion state, where she once again consumes all of her energy and unleashes an even bigger electro attack. And the final one, which is a special burst, and the one you'll be doing with her mostly. Unlike the previous two, which have a burst animation, this one is more like a 4-star burst, since it doesn't have a distinct animation. However, the crazy thing about this burst is that you can use it at a fraction of the cost. So, how do you activate this? Well, you see, once you exit the Fiery Passion state after doing the skill rotation we discussed before, she gains an Apex Drive effect, which allows her to do this special burst within 1.5 seconds. And as an indicator of this special burst being available, you will see a triangular shield around her, and not to mention the burst icon will literally glow up. As for why this burst is better than the other two, it's cause this special burst can be done at a 30 energy cost, while the other two require 70 energy. And if you do the special burst twice, its damage is much more than either of the 70 energy bursts. So not only are you saving the burst animation time, you are also saving 10 energy while doing more damage. To summarize her entire kit so far, you use her elemental skill, gaining 20 Night Soul points, followed by a normal attack into a plunge attack, gaining an additional 25 points and entering the Fiery Passion state. Now, you do the enhanced skill, follow it up with a normal attack and a plunge attack, consuming all of her Night Soul points and exiting the Fiery Passion state, but at the same time activating the Apex Drive effect for 1.5 seconds, allowing her to now do the special 30 energy burst. And if you have been enjoying the video so far, then a sub to the channel would be electrifying. Moving on to her passives, the first one just increases the damage of her plunge shockwaves, and that's it. However, the second one grants her 30% extra attack per Night Soul burst for up to 2 times. And for those who don't know, Night Soul burst is essentially any elemental damage done by a teammate when there is a Natlan unit in the team, and the cooldown to trigger it again decreases with more Natlan units in the party. So this passive essentially makes it so that you need 3 nighttime characters in her team to be able to keep this buff up consistently, therefore making her best team the Overload comp with Mauvika. The only exception to this rule would be Xiaonan teams, cause she can ignore the cooldown on Night Soul Burst and trigger it with her skill whenever she wants. However, in my opinion, Xianyun Varesa teams are just better than Xiaonan Varesa teams. Granted, you are losing out on the extra 30% attack from her passive. With all this being said, I would recommend leveling up all of her talents as each one contributes significantly to her overall damage. So, now that we understand her kit, let's discuss weapons. And to no one's surprise, her signature is obviously the best in slot, followed by Kagura, Lost Prayers, and Dragon Daddy's weapon. On the F2B side, the Fontaine craftable weapon Flowing Purity is a solid choice, and the one I'll be using to rank other weapons. As for 4 stars in general, the best one would be Vitsith, but its passive is very much RNG dependent, so pray to God you don't get the EM buff. The full list of her weapon rankings is displayed on screen. Moving on to her artifacts, the new Plunge base set is obviously the best in slot, but Obsidian is almost on par with it, with the new set edging out slightly. As for the stats, the standard choices are what you are looking for, so an attack sands, electro damage bonus goblet, and crit rate or damage circlet depending on your crit values, with a focus on getting 130 ER minimum. Do note that if she is on the Obsidian set, then its 4-piece effect of extra crit rate won't be activated until she exits Fiery Passion for the first time, since that is when Nightfall consumption happens. However, if you do want to activate the set early, then you can hold the E button with her in the beginning for like a fraction of a second and that'll activate it. But being honest, you are better off using the new set, as holding E during a battle is really annoying. Another option is to do E cap at the beginning of a rotation, because once you do E cap in the beginning, she'll enter Night Soul state or the Fiery Passion state and will stay in it, so that once everything is set up and you return to Varesa, she can activate Codex after just 1 E cap. Now, before we get into teams, let's discuss Constellations' rapid fire style. Constellation 1, extra damage from plunges and extra sprinting time while holding E. Constellation 2, enables the special burst whenever she plunges regardless of Fiery Passion or not, and grants an additional 11.5 energy. Constellation 3, extra levels to burst. Constellation 4, extra damage from plunges and burst. Constellation 5, extra levels to normals. Constellation 6, even further, beyond damage with plunges and burst while restoring an additional 30 energy. So commanding that with C2, you're getting 41.5 energy per plunge. As for her Constellation breakpoints, I'd say that they are C2 and C6, so either stop at C2 or go all the way. Finally, we have her team, and primarily I would recommend you to run her in Overload comp, the Xiaonan comp, the Cloud Retainer comp, or the Aggravate comp. The Overload comp being the best comp damage-wise and fun-wise in my opinion. The Cloud Retainer comp is also really good, with the Xiaonan one being on par with it. And finally, the Aggravate comp is also decent, I suppose. Now obviously in all of these teams I mentioned, you can replace units with others who do almost the same thing, like replacing Mauvika with Xiangling in the Overload comp, but that'll obviously result in less damage, and not to mention Xiangling herself has ER issues. Do note that in the Overload comp, I would recommend doing a single normal attack with Varesa in the beginning, or E-cap if she is on Obsidian, cause that'll apply Electro to the enemy, which can then be overloaded by Mauvika, granting Chevreuse an overcharge ball for her buffs. Another thing to keep in mind is that you cannot replace iansan with Bennett in her teams, cause she moves around a lot and Benny's circle ain't made for that. So now that we understand everything about her, let's discuss Varesa versus Xiao. And to give you a one-line answer, it's yes, Varesa teams do more damage than Xiao's. But you see, this comparison is kinda unfair because of the units in each of the teams. And what do I mean by that? Well, Xiao's best team is the Final Fantasy XX comp, comprising of Furina, Faruzan, Xiao himself, and Xianyun. Now in this team, we have 2 5-stars and a 4-star which has now been out for 2 years. So having her C6 is not that uncommon. However, in Varesa's best team, which is the Overload comp, we have Chevreuse, Iansan, Varesa herself, and Mauvika, which is 2 4-stars and 1 5-star. And I'll be honest, getting a 4-star unit with its constellations is tougher than getting a 5-star unit. So assuming that only one of the older 4-star units in the team is C6, I'd say that both teams are pretty neck and neck. The only exception to this is the Varesa Aggravate comp, which is worse than Final Fantasy XX in general. Now, the only issue I have with Varesa is the fact that she seems kind of weak compared to other 5.x units we have been getting, besides Mizuki of course. And speaking of issues, in the beginning, I said that the 5E rotation which other content creators were pitching has an issue. And that issue is the fact that when you get to the 5th skill in the rotation, it will most definitely be on a 1 second cooldown before you can do it again. And if you are thinking that 1 second cooldown is nothing insane, then I agree with you. However, since her gameplay is super fast, it will feel annoying every time it happens. So if annoyance is less of a factor for you, then 5E rotation is the perfect one. But if not, then 4E for the win. With all this being said, we now finally have the answer to the question in the beginning. And god damn, is it a crazy one.